Okay, and then I will, okay. Uh, can you see the screen, a full screen of the slide? Not yet.
We can see na po.
So this is projected on full screen na
Hindi,
the
Hindi pa
hindi
po
po.
siyang naka-slideshow view.
okay, sige, sige. Yeah. Okay, so how about this?
Yes, ma'am, okay na po.
Okay, so please let me know if the slides are moving or they've been stuck or the slide is stuck on or the PowerPoint is stuck on one slide so I can do something about this. Okay. So for today, we will have the summary lecture for February 28 to March 6. So there are several PowerPoints that have been uploaded for this period. So this is a summary of all of these PowerPoint presentations. And just like what I did for the summary lecture for last week, I also have picked up some representative slides from the PowerPoint presentations to more or less encapsulate that particular PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so can you see this now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sige. So the following presentations are included in this summary lecture. So from lectures 8 to lectures 15. So these are the topics covered. So pollution, eutrophication, acid rain, biomagnification, ozone layer depletion, global warming, wasteland reclamation, and waste management. So am I coming across clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
okay
ma'am.
lang? Okay, sige.
Opo.
So I remember, I'm not sure if I remember I asked you to share your expectations for the course, and there was one who said that he's happy that some of the current environmental issues are covered in the course. So I'm glad you noticed that, or that person noticed that if he's coming from this section. So these are actually current environmental issues that are actually plaguing our world right now. Okay, so we start with the pollution, and in the PowerPoint presentation, there is this particular description of pollution, which is it's an undesirable and unfavorable change in the physical, chemical, biological characteristics of land, air, and water that negatively affects plant, animal, and human life. So there's nothing positive about pollution, so it's undesirable, it's unfavorable, and the effect on plant, animal, and human life is negative. So negatively affects. So we should not tolerate pollution, and if there is pollution, we should do something about it. Especially if it's just about to start, then we should curb pollution because before we know it, then it becomes uncontrollable, such as what is happening right now. If you will notice in the PowerPoint presentation, we always start with the description and then the extent of the problem. And then towards the end, we always end up with a happy note or an optimistic note that something can be done about the problem. So I hope you notice that, and you especially pay particular attention to the causes and eventually the solutions, the possible solutions, no matter how big the problem is, or no matter how widespread the problem is, there is always something that can be done. And each of us, you and I, can contribute to the solution of the problem. And of course, we can also contribute to the worsening of the problem. So both ways. Okay, so This is environmental pollution. Of course, we can use pollution in the word pollution in many ways. So, like pollution of the mind, pollution of the body, etc. So, here we're talking about environmental pollution. So, this refers to addition of materials and substances into the different parts of the earth. So, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, or the lithosphere. And this would change their properties and make their use by man and other living organisms lethal or dangerous. So, environmental pollutants here are of several types, like depending on their state, they could be solid, liquid, and gaseous substances that added to the environment in concentrations that can be injurious or lethal to living organisms. So, especially of course, we are all aware that the environment is capable of like maybe protecting itself or maybe writing itself HTING, or maybe neutralizing some of the harmful effects of certain substances. But however, we're aware that pollution eventually worsens because of the sheer volume of the pollutants that are added into either air, land, or water. And because of that sheer volume, the 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 system, or what we refer to as the balance and check system of the environment, is eventually overwhelmed, and the environment would not be able to cope with that, and therefore eventually suffers the consequences of pollution. Okay, so we go to types of pollutants, and you're all aware of this, right? So the biodegradable pollutants, these are the pollutants that can be rapidly decomposed by natural processes. So a very good example of this is domestic sewage, di ba? And of course, some of the wastes that we are aware of are actually used for composting. So like fecal wastes can be used for composting. So the refuse in kitchen, so like the peelings of fruits, the vegetable residues, the meat residues, they can actually be used for composting. But when there's just such a huge volume of this being dumped into a system, then that becomes too much for the environment to cope with. Okay, and this becomes like a pollutant and exerts its negative influence on the environment. And of course, the more dangerous of the pollutants would be the non-biodegradable pollutants, because they degrade very slowly in the natural environment, or they may not even degrade at all within our lifetime. So like for example, plastic. So plastic would remain there for a long, long time. Aluminum cans or glass, and even DDT and mercuric salts. And you will see the effect of DDT and mercuric salts, for example, in biological magnification. Okay, so the more dangerous of this would be the non-biodegradable pollutants. Okay, so we're all aware of the health effects of pollution, especially when it comes to air pollution or the air pollutants. We know the effects of this on the respiratory system because we inhale them, and the pollutants such as hydrocarbons can even cause a very serious problems like seizures, irregular heart rhythms, or damage to the excretory system, and worse, can even eventually cause death. So, for example, we should be very careful with the dry cleaning and house cleaning chemicals, or those solvents that we use that are used in paints. So especially when we clean our toilets or lavatories and etc., we have to make sure that we use gloves, and we also have to make sure that we use masks so that we don't inhale the 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 substances that are being released in these household cleaning materials. Okay, so this is the control of water pollution. Of course, we have several. So we have in the presentation on pollution, there are several kinds of pollution: water, air, land pollution, even pollution the nuclear pollution, and so on, which of course is the more dangerous type of pollutant. So for control of water pollution, there are a lot of remedies that are being given to you. So treatment of garbage and sewage, chemical treatment, extraction of useful substances, reduction of temperature of wastewater. So particularly itong reduction of temperature of wastewater, especially in nuclear power plants. So the wastewater that is involved in the operation of nuclear power plant, there should be a way by which the temperature uh, could be reduced before this is dumped or are released into the seawater, for example. So minimize the use of non-biodegradable pesticides, because we are all aware that eventually this will find their way into the food chain or into the trophic level, and eventually undergo biological magnification. So proper implementation of anti-pollution laws of the government. I think we have all types of laws to prevent pollution. So we have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. We are not lacking in these anti-pollution laws. I think the problem is with the implementation, or the strict implementation of these laws, which of course is a problem, not only in our country but in other countries as well. Even the more developed countries would experience this kind of problem. So for control of soil pollution, proper disposal of industrial and agricultural wastes, recycling and recovery of materials, minimize the manufacture and use of chemical fertilizers, and reduce the use of pesticides. So in connection with the control of soil pollution, I remember there was a time when there was a problem on where to where to construct the next landfill, because there are no more landfills. All the landfills have been filled up because of the wastes that are generated by Metro Manila. And many of the provinces that were targeted to host the landfills have refused, because of course of the consequences of this, like the air pollution, and then of course the land pollution, and then even the risk of the pollutants leaking or leaching into groundwater, which of course is a very important source of domestic water. So there was a refusal. There was an objection from many of the provinces that were requested uh, to to construct or to host the landfills that would be used for the garbages or the wastes that are generated from Metro Manila. So even no matter how much money you promise them, that would not be enough to defray the cost of the serious consequences of pollution. Okay, so the following are control measures when it comes to the nuclear wastes. So prevention of leakage of radioactive elements from nuclear reactors, proper storage and disposal of nuclear wastes, and of course the regular monitoring and increasing the use of non-harmful energy sources. Of course, we know that there's so much energy that can be generated from nuclear power plants, but the trade-off would be the danger, the risks. So how do we make sure that there's proper storage and disposal of nuclear wastes? So we're not sure of that. And how about regular monitoring? Even those nuclear power plants that are found in or that are found in well-developed countries, some of them have failed. So let alone in developing countries like us. So that regular monitoring. So there is an alternative that is being offered, and this is the use of renewable sources of energy, such as, for example, energy from the sun or solar energy. And I think we're all aware of many companies that are involved in the production of solar panels. And this is a source of energy that is becoming more and more popular. So the energy from the wind or the energy from geothermal energy. So all of these are alternative sources of energy. Okay, so the next lecture was on eutrophication, and we start with the definition of eutrophication. So the word eutrophication was coined from EU, meaning well, and trophos, meaning fed. So that the word eutrophication means well fed or nutrient rich. So what's the problem with being well fed or nutrient rich? Of course, we always have problems with excess of anything. So for as long as you have moderate nutrients or just enough nutrients, you'll be okay. But if there is an excess of nutrients that is being pumped into a system, then um, we all know that we'll end up with the problem, especially with, for example, algal blooms, which is what is experienced or what happens in lakes that have undergone eutrophication. So eutrophication alters the dynamics of a number of plants, animals, and bacterial populations, thus bringing about changes in community structure. Of course, we have a definite community structure, for example, in healthy environment or in healthy ecosystems. So we have so many or specific populations of producers and herbivores and consumers and so on. But with eutrophication, there's an alteration in the dynamics of the number of plants and animals and bacterial populations. And uh, the slant is towards the increase in bacterial populations and the number of producers, so at the expense of the animal populations, because with so much nutrients, then the plants would undergo increase in number, multiplication in number, because they have so much nutrients for them to grow, for them to increase in number, so that the end result would be like, for example, the algal bloom that you will see in later slides, or that maybe you have seen in the slide on eutrophication. And of course, bacterial populations, because there's so much decomposition that is ongoing in uh, in a system that has undergone very high degree of eutrophication. So it is a form of water pollution, and like other forms of human activities, they could influence ecological cycles. Okay, so these are the classification of lakes or water bodies for that matter on the basis of nutrients content. Okay, so oligotrophic lake, these are or water bodies or rivers, for example, or swamps. This is the situation uh, where the nutrients are low, productivity is low. Many species occur in low populations, but you have nice, clean water. So there's no preponderance of one type of species population. In other words, they're all something like in more or less equilibrium, and they are happy the way they are. So you have producers which are okay supporting the population of herbivores and so on. Then the next level is mesotrophic lake. So this is where you have intermediate levels of nutrients. So the plankton would also be intermediate in number. There could be some organic sediment and moderately clear water. So we're still fine at this level, the mesotrophic lake. But eventually, when you reach the next level, which is the eutrophic lake, so these lakes would be very rich in nutrients. There is now low transparency. In other words, the turbidity is already very high, and there would be high plankton population, and then there is less oxygen and showing increasing signs of water quality problems. So you now have like a blanket of producers, or what we refer to as algal bloom, that forms on the surface of the water, so that light may not be able to penetrate, so that the producers that may be found underneath may not receive the right amount of light for their photosynthesis, and there may not be too there may not be there may not be enough oxygen also for existence of for example consumers on the surface, or even on the bottom, or the benthic organisms. So in the hypertrophic lake, this is the more or less the worst. So very high nutrient concentrations, where plant growth is determined by physical factors. Water quality problems are serious and almost continuous. So we'll see this I think you saw this in the different slides in this topic. Okay, so there are two types of eutrophication. So in other words, eutrophication is actually a natural process. But when humans come in in a process that we call cultural eutrophication, when their activities start to speed up the process of eutrophication, then this is what is referred to as cultural eutrophication. And then we expect problems to arise from this, because the process is sped up compared with natural eutrophication, where the process uh, is uh, is being or the process is going on within a long period of time. So I think you have something like this. Okay, so this is natural eutrophication. So this is a process that occurs as a lake or river ages over a period of hundreds or thousands of years. So this is an ecosystem. You have organisms living in this system, and this is governed or influenced by physicochemical factors. Of course, there is death, and the physical factors would be in the form of the the sediments starting to settle on the bottom as a result probably of decomposition, and maybe just leaching off of sediments from the surface or from the margins of the water body. So this would take a while. It would take centuries, and this is natural eutrophication. So I remember in my geology, and we were asked, how do you differentiate a young river from an old river? And the answer is that a young river would have a V-shaped bottom, and it is deep, and the water flow is very fast. Whereas an old river, because of this result of siltation, the bottom is now U-shaped, or even not U-shaped, but even like uh, inverted C, and the river is also shallow, and the water flow is also slower. So that would be and this is the result, of course, of the processes that have been undergone by such river. So the natural eutrophication that has occurred in such kind of system. So in cultural eutrophication, this is a process that occurs when humans release excessive amounts of nutrients and shortens the rate of aging to decades. So can you imagine, from centuries to decades? So as you can see here in natural eutrophication, you see the margins, you see the margins of the this water body to be there would be a lot of factories, for example, or farms, livestock farms like what you have here, and then factories, and all of this would be dumping their wastes into this body of water. And in the process, eutrophication is sped up. So from centuries, this is shortened to decades. So this is how the process of eutrophication occurs. So you have an influx of high volumes of nutrients, such as here, nitrogen and phosphorus, and this could be coming from for example, chemical fertilizers or even pesticides that are leaching into these water bodies because there's no proper disposal of agricultural wastes or even pesticides and everything. So all of this will find their way into the this body of water, and this will be the source of nutrients for the phytoplankton, and they would eventually form algal blooms. And then these algal blooms would prevent light from coming in, so that the seagrass here or the sedge grass here are deprived of sunlight, and they will eventually die. And then there might also be uh, depressed oxygen levels that can be used by the animals or the benthic animals or organisms found at the bottom, and therefore they start dying. So with death there is decomposition, and decomposition of course would use up even more oxygen, further lowering the oxygen levels. Okay. Okay, so these are the effects of eutrophication on the environment. So there's a decrease in the transparency of water. So remember what we said earlier, there may be algal blooms, or the decomposition itself would release residues that would make the water turbid. So there's development of anoxic conditions. So this would be low oxygen levels, increased algal blooms, so loss of habitats, like for example the seagrass beds that or the sedge grasses that we have seen earlier. And then changes in the dominant biota, so changes in plankton and macrophyte community structure, or changes in fish composition, because we all know that there would be an increase in the populations of plankton, or there would be algal blooms. So what would be the effect of this on the community structure? So decrease in species diversity. So there are just a few organisms that are able to endure such kind of harsh conditions. So the harsh conditions would be very turbid water, and then anoxic conditions that you see in this slide, and of course lesser sunlight because of the turbid water, so that only very few organisms would be able to tolerate such kind of harsh conditions, and therefore there's a decrease in species diversity. And of course there's a change in the aesthetic value of the water body. So who would want to swim in a body of water that has algal blooms, or that is very turbid? You know for a fact that there's so much decomposition that is ongoing there, and you would not want to swim in such kind of water. So I remember when we were younger, Pasig River used to be a place where a lot of children in our community would swim. That is where they learned how to swim. So jumping from the bridge over that part of Pasig River, they would jump into the Pasig River, which used to be, of course, it wasn't as clear as ideal, but people would still swim there. There are a lot of children that would swim in that part of the Pasig River. But now it is hard to imagine how you could swim in such kind of really so polluted and almost and actually a dead river. So change in the aesthetic value of the water body. So may I know if I am coming in clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. So the prevention, so identification of all nutrient sources. So where are the nutrients coming from? Maybe there are a lot of farms in the area that are using pesticides and using herbicides and using um, chemical fertilizers that are leaching into the water body. Of course, industrial activities. There will be a lot of that would discharge their effluents into that body of water. So we need to make sure that there would be very good agricultural practices, such as in fertilizer contribution, in plant use, and localization of crops. Then, of course, we have to take notice of the nature of the soil, the vegetation, and the interaction between the soil and the water, and the knowledge of the hydrodynamics. So the way nutrients are transported and of the vulnerability of the aquifer. So what would be the possibility or the risk of these nutrients or pesticides or pollutants being leached into the aquifer or into the water table. Okay, so next we go to the acid rain. So I remember a long time ago when I was just starting in College of Arts and Sciences, just like what I told you before. I started teaching at the College of Arts and Sciences, and then moved to College of Public Health, and now returned to the College of Arts and Sciences. Then there was this group of I think that was in the 1970s or early 80s. So early 80s. So there was this group of members of the Greenpeace movement. Are you all familiar with the Greenpeace movement? Di ba? This is an environmental group. At matatapang talaga sila. They would chase ships that they know are guilty of dumping wastes into the water. So at the risk of being maimed or being harmed by these very powerful owners of ship, but they would do this just the same. So during that time, they were something like advocating for the prevention of acid rain. I think that was that's what I remember, because they said that they were asking us, do you know what acid rain is? So of course, from the name itself, this is rain that is acidic. So as to how it is formed, we have no idea. But the group, that group from Greenpeace, showed us what an acid rain looks like. Not in the sense that you can actually, when it rains, you can actually say that, oh, the raindrops are acidic or something. But what they did was to collect rain sample during the time it was raining. Luckily, it was raining during that time, so they collected the rain sample, and then we did not have any pH meter yet, so we were just using litmus paper to test the acidity or alkalinity of the solution. So we used litmus paper, and I think if it turns red, the solution is acidic. If it turns blue, the solution is alkalinic. That's what I remember from how we used litmus paper during that time. So when we dipped the strip of litmus paper into the rain sample of rainwater, it turned red. So clear indication of the acidity of that rainwater sample. So that was my first encounter of acid rain. So from then on, I was very careful to use an umbrella every time it rains, because you'll never know the effect of acid rain on your skin. Maybe you won't be able to feel it right away, but I'm not sure if this is going to be cumulative or something. So this is how sulfuric acid in the rain and nitric acid in the rain would eventually develop. So this is uh, the the process that goes on. Okay, so the effects of acid rain, of course, they have harmful effects on the environment and health of the population, and even on structures. So like buildings, national monuments, and bridges, because this is acid, and of course, the ability to corrode is very high. So damage to natural ecosystem is significant, especially considering effects on plants, trees, rivers, lakes, soil, and land, wherever the acid rain falls. And animals and plants are severely affected, and food sources are, of course, are reduced. And there would be diseases and mutations that may develop, and eventually death results in extreme cases. Okay, so this would be the effects on human health. So the SO2 and the NO2, they could interact with the atmosphere, so that fine particles, sulfate and nitrate particles, because these are very fine and they are very lightweight, so they can be blown by the wind over long distances. And this could be inhaled by people. And of course, this could cause disorders such as asthma and bronchitis, and even over time, they can result in skin cancer. Okay, so solutions for acid rain. So understand acid depositions, causes, and effect. So understand how acid rain damages the environment. What changes could be made to air pollution sources that cause this problem? Of course, the causes of this problem are already what we mentioned earlier. So use of low sulfur coal, where the amount of sulfur oxides emitted by the power plants can be reduced by burning coal with a very low percentage of sulfur present. But as you can see here, there would be retrofitting, for example, in power plants or even in factories. So the factory owners, if this would mean additional costs, would not be very receptive to this kind of solutions. So you'll have to make sure that these measures are going to be cost effective, so that eventually the production would even be more, and the safety of people would also be assured. But if you're just talking about safety and additional costs, then this may not be very appealing to factory owners. Okay, so we move now to biomagnification. So there's a definition of biomagnification. So this is also known as the long the long words. There are actually two words to this: biological magnification. So shortened as biomagnification, just like what we know of ecological system, shortened to ecosystem. So this is an increase of substances that occurs in the food chain. So as you move from one trophic level to another, which is what is actually presented in the food chain, there is a corresponding increase in these substances, so that these substances concerned usually found in contaminated environments. So you have to the environment should first be contaminated with these particular substances, and then this will be incorporated by the producers, and as the producers are eaten by the herbivores, and as the herbivores are eaten by the carnivores, then there's a corresponding increase in the magnitude or in the level of these substances. So when the and of course this can be explained as follows. So the organism higher in the food chain would eat multiple organisms from the lower trophic level, each of which contains the toxin. And the toxins become more and more concentrated as one goes higher in the food chain. So I hope you can understand this. So for example, the herbivore or the zooplankton would not just eat one phytoplankton, but several phytoplankton. Each of these phytoplankton already uh, containing the substance, the toxic substance. So at the level of the zooplankton, there's already a corresponding magnification. And small fish would, of course, eat numerous zooplankton. So at the level of the small fish, there is another corresponding magnification. And of course, the big fish would eat several smaller fish. And that is how this biological magnification can be explained. So since this tendency continues throughout the food chain, therefore the highest in the food chain ends up with the greatest amount of the toxins. So sino ba yung highest in the food chain? Siyempre tayo yun. And therefore, we accumulate, or we get the highest level of these toxic substances, or we consume the highest level. We end up getting the highest level of the uh, toxin, of the toxic substances. So we differentiate between biomagnification and bioaccumulation. So bioaccumulation is the increase of toxic substances in an organism's body. So you are just referring to a single organism, and the accumulation of the harmful substances in its body, and of course the harmful effects that would be exerted by such accumulation on the organism. So magnification, on the other hand, would refer to substances being passed along the food chain. So while it may appear that yung bioaccumulation, yung organism, isang organism lang naman yun eh. But the point is, if this organism is actually serving as food to another organism, then the toxins that has been accumulated that have been accumulated in that organism can be passed on now to the next level. So bioaccumulation will lead to a number of problems in the organisms which harbors the toxic substances. And as we have mentioned earlier, if this organism serves as food to the next trophic level, then the substances that have been accumulated in this organism will also undergo biomagnification. Okay, so these are some of the toxins that magnify. So DDT and mercury, PCBs, cyanide, which is used in leaching gold and in fishing. I'm not sure if this still practiced. This is of course banned. Cyanide fishing. So the use of cyanide in order to kill fish, so that there would be more harvest of fish. But of course, this is very dangerous, and therefore this is banned completely. But I'm not sure if fishermen are actually observing this ban. So selenium concentrated by farming desert oils, which is toxic and causes reproductive failures in organisms, and other heavy metals such as mercury, copper, nickel, zinc, and lead, which can affect the nervous system and reproduction. Okay, so I think in the PowerPoint presentation on biological magnification, the story of DDT was given. So DDT is dichlorophenyl trichloroethane. So this was used extensively in the 1960s to the 1970s. This is um, an insecticide that is used to control mosquito populations. So, but eventually, these substances found their way into water bodies, because of course they land on the ground, and eventually with rains, the DDT and the DDT is eventually leached into the water body. So and then absorbed by organisms such as fish, and eventually the bald eagles would feed on this fish, and the bald eagles actually suffered the brunt of this biomagnification. So the populations of this type of eagles dwindled rapidly, almost to extinction. And realizing that serious problem, there was a ban on the use of DDT. And I think you saw that story in the PowerPoint presentation. So this is how it happened. So the DDT can be found eventually found its way into the environment, into the aquatic environment. So if you examine the level in the water, the level might not be alarming. So harmless naman yung level niya, not toxic level. So you might be like complacent about this. You might like feel very comfortable about the non-toxic levels, but eventually these substances will be absorbed by the plants, which are in turn fed upon by small fish, and then the big fish, and then eventually the tertiary consumers. And you can see here the increase in the levels of the DDT, so that eventually the bald eagle would suffer the would take in the highest, would end up with the highest level of DDT. So these are the measures to prevent biomagnification. So US and several countries banned the use of DDT as soon as they realized the danger that it has posed on the bald populations of bald eagles. So landfills also getting rid of these substances because of their ability to seep into the groundwater. So just like what we mentioned earlier. So and then many new pesticides are biologically based and break down readily upon contact with soil or reaction to sunlight. So these are new generations of pesticides. So they don't remain in the environment. So they are much more target specific and less harmful to non-target organisms. So when we say more target specific, just targeting the pests that they are supposed to kill. So and less harmful to non-target organisms. So long-term effects and overall impact of new and existing chemicals on ecosystem are evaluated by laboratory procedure. So for example, what we refer to as environmental impact assessment. So what would be the effects of these pesticides or these fertilizers, particularly pesticides on the environment. So would they remain? Are these non-biodegradable? How long do they remain in the environment? Would they accumulate? So a persistence of chemical is tested during the pesticide registration process by the U.S. Pest Management and Regulatory Agency. Okay. Next, we have ozone layer depletion. So I remember this was a very big problem. I think in the 90s when there was so much alarm that was raised about the ozone hole in the Antarctic, and that with many people already suffering from skin cancer and exposure to UV radiation, and also even in Canada and areas that are in the temperate region. Okay, so what is the ozone layer? So there's a description of this in the PowerPoint presentation, and that you can actually associate this with I think this was first mentioned in the PowerPoint on the various regions of the atmosphere. So this is a naturally occurring protective shield in the stratosphere, which absorbs the sun's ultraviolet radiation, preventing it from reaching the Earth's surface. So, in other words, the ozone layer is a protective layer that prevents the dangerous ultraviolet radiation from the sun. However, in the 1970s, scientists discovered that chemicals called CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons, which are used in refrigerants and aerosol spray, actually are the ones responsible for the destruction of the ozone layer. I think in the PowerPoint presentation, there's an illustration of how these substances could actually destroy the ozone in the ozone layer. So please pay particular attention to that diagram or that picture. So these are the causes of the ozone layer depletion. Of course, the various substances that we have mentioned earlier that are used in air conditioning, refrigeration, aerosols, etc. And they're responsible for the destruction of the ozone layer. So, and just like what I mentioned earlier, there is this chemical illustration of how the CFCs actually destroy the ozone in the ozone layer. So oxides of nitrogen released from the exhaust of large fleets of supersonic aircrafts. These are also responsible for the increasing rate of ozone destruction. So, and of course, what is also disturbing is that the CFCs and the halons have long staying period in the atmosphere. So they stay there for a long, long time, like 60 to 110 years. So more than a lifetime. And for example, this substance has a residency time of 55 to 400 years, so several lifetimes. So they remain inactive in the troposphere and takes about 20 to 40 years for these chemicals to reach the stratosphere. So this is the effects. So destruction is seen to increase the cases of cancer and cataracts. Gaps and holes it means entry of UV radiation. That's why we call it the ozone hole. because there's a hole that has the hole is the part that has been destroyed by the CFCs and all of these substances. So also causes damage to certain crops and to plankton, alters the ocean ecosystem, harmful to flora and fauna. So also causes an increase in carbon dioxide due to the decrease in vegetation. So with the death of the plants, you would expect increase in carbon dioxide because there will be fewer plants to absorb the carbon dioxide. Okay, so this would be the consequences. So the stratospheric ozone layer is the key life support system because this prevents the entry of the very dangerous UV radiation. So depletion of ozone will result in increase in percentage incidence of UV radiations. And of course, this will have effect on the DNA that could eventually result to mutation and genetic defects. Of course, the skin cancer that can be promoted by this would be squamous cell carcinoma and malignant melanoma. So as the name implies malignant, so this is really something very serious. So cataracts and depresses the immune system. If you have a depressed immune system, you can be target of many pathogens. So 1% drop in ozone can lead to 4 to 6% rise in the number of skin cancer cases. So also increased inflow of UV radiations will lower the sea productivity, affecting the marine flora and fauna, and also adverse impact on agricultural crops and natural vegetation. So uh, definitely we say that almost all aspects of the ecosystem can be affected by this problem of depletion of the stratospheric ozone. So there was this realizing that this is really life threatening. There was this Montreal Protocol of 1987 that was signed by 35 developed and developing countries. So the protocol put limitations on the use of CFCs and halons, and phasing out of its use was scheduled. So these are the other measures that were proposed. Okay, so next we have, of course, the very important and actually the buzzword when it comes to environmental problems, which is global climate change or global warming. Okay, so a definition of global warming, it's an increase in the Earth's average atmospheric temperature that causes corresponding changes in climate, and that may result from the greenhouse effect. Measurable increases in the average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and land masses. So, scientists believe that the Earth is currently facing a period of rapid warming brought on by the rising levels of heat trapping gases known as the greenhouse gases or the GHGs. So, scientists believe that there's just a very rapid increase or rise in the temperature levels. So, whereas before, we have had the cyclic episodes of global warming in the past, and that is actually what the detractors of climate change are saying, that we are just into this cyclic episode of global warming. But of course this has been proven wrong, that we really are uh, the the global warming is just so sped up and really very serious, that it is no longer considered as like the natural global warming. Okay, so the greenhouse effect is caused by increased levels in carbon dioxide. So these are the culprits: carbon dioxide, methane, chlorofluorocarbons, or CFC, and other pollutants. In the end, it's actually air pollution, massive air pollution, that is causing this global warming. So since the early 20th century, the Earth's mean temperature has increased by zero point 0.8 degrees centigrade, with about two-thirds of the increase occurring since the 1980. So I think if you have seen the inconvenient truth of former Vice President Al Gore, he presents the very steep increase in the temperatures that started in the 1980s. So the global warming has been sped up since the 1980s compared to before, where it would take centuries to achieve a 1 degree rise in temperature. But since the 1980s, the increase in temperature has been sped up. So warming of the climate system is unequivocal, and scientists are 95 to 100% sure that it is primarily caused by increasing concentration of the greenhouse gases produced by human activities such as the consumption of fossil fuels and deforestation. So this is how it is usually depicted. So this is the usual illustration that we see to explain how global warming occurs. So of course, the solar radiation is coming from the sun. There's no other source. So this strikes the earth, and and the solar radiation, most of the solar radiation is reflected by the earth and the atmosphere. But because of massive pollution, air pollution, this radiation is trapped, absorbed, and readmitted in all directions by the greenhouse gas molecules. So the greenhouse gas molecules sort of act as a blanket on the earth to trap the heat that is coming from the sun. And as a result of this, there's warming of the earth's surface and the lower atmosphere. So that is the greenhouse gas when that is the greenhouse effect when heat is trapped by these greenhouse gases. So instead of heat being reflected or being dissipated into the atmosphere and eventually into space, the all these greenhouse gases would have the effect of would trap the heat in the on the Earth's surface and prevent this heat from escaping into the atmosphere and then into the space. And therefore, the end result is global warming. So pollution is one of the biggest man-made problems leading to global warming. So burning fossil fuels, greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, mining coal and oil, of course, increase in the population and therefore increase in fuel consumption, more food, more methane, more burning of fossil fuels, and of course, increased transportation. So air, land, water transportation, all of this would be emitting all of these gases. Okay, so the effects of global warming, sea level rise is accelerating, and we know for a fact that uh, because of this rise in sea level, the first that would be affected are those low-lying countries. So, like for example, the countries the island countries in the Pacific. So, with the increase in the sea level, these countries will be wiped out, will be eventually covered in water, and will be wiped out from the map. So, planet's temperature is rising. Dangerous heat waves are becoming more common. So, I think you're familiar with the very dangerous and lethal heat waves that occurred in the past, and there were a lot of people who died, especially the elderly. So extreme storm events are increasing in many areas. So of course, we're all aware, or we're all familiar with the super typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda and the devastation that it has caused in the Visayas, and of course, most recently, the super typhoon Odette. So more severe droughts are occurring in other areas. So, for example, countries in Africa are starving or are experiencing famine because of the severe and prolonged droughts, and warmer weathers favoring prairie fires and prairie droughts. So you've heard about the bushfire in Australia, and also the wildfire in California that wiped out huge swaths of land. So these have significant and serious effects on human health. So Canada's Arctic region's sea ice is shrinking. So what's going to happen to the polar bears? So the salmon survival has decreased by 1/3 since the early 1990s. Okay, so how do we reduce global warming? So we know that the problem of global warming is really very serious, but we can contribute uh, our own in our own way. We can contribute what little we can in the solution of the problem. So we can actually be part of the solution and also part of the problem. So we can be part of the solution by reducing our carbon footprint. So like by using more fuel efficient vehicles, reducing our vehicle use, and then on a larger scale, improving energy efficiency in buildings, developing carbon capture and storage processes, increasing the use of solar power, and stopping deforestation. So, with deforestation, of course, would be the destruction of trees, and with lesser trees, there would be lesser consumption or lesser extraction of carbon dioxide. So on our own, how do we reduce our carbon footprint? So we reuse shopping bags, and maybe we can plant a tree. We can buy fresh foods instead of frozen. We can start a carpool with our coworkers or classmates. But of course, given the pandemic situation, this is of course prohibited because of the requirement for physical distancing. So you make sure that you keep your car tuned up and protect forests worldwide. So we can be members of groups that would advocate for the protection of forests, and of course, fly less. So next we have a wasteland reclamation. So what's an example of reclamation? So there are large areas in Manila Bay that have already been reclaimed. It is said that up to saan ba yun? Up to Taft Avenue. This would be from Taft Avenue all the way to Manila Bay. These are all reclaimed areas, and therefore the foundation is not as good. So sabi nila, pag nag-earthquake daw, the most solid foundation would be in Quezon City. So in Manila, yun ang medyo porous. So very vulnerable to liquefaction, particularly in the reclaimed areas. Okay, so definition of wasteland and wasteland reclamation. So wasteland is a land that is unfit for cultivation or is unproductive, unimproved or barren. Kaya nga wasteland ang tawag sa kanya. So wasteland reclamation can be in the form of creation of new land where there is water, just like what we said earlier. There are of large areas in Manila Bay that have been reclaimed. So even the esteros. I remember, were you already alive during Ondoy? Nung nagka-Ondoy, buhay na ba kayo? Anyone? Hello? Are you still there?
Yes, ma'am, I think so.
Buhay na kayo nung Ondoy? 'Di ba yung Ondoy that I think flooded or that sank many parts of Marikina and also Quezon City and actually the Metro Manila area. So and one of the reasons, there of course there were several reasons why the flood was that huge and so widespread. So sabi nila, of course, the clogging of the drainage with plastics and non-biodegradable materials. And then one of the other reasons would be the filling up of the esteros. So i- tinabunan na lahat ang mga esteros, and there were a lot of settlements that have been located or relocated in these areas, so that yung esteros are supposed to be drainage areas, and if esteros are filled up, walang pupuntahan yung tubig kung hindi doon sa areas where the esteros are used to be located. And that was why the flood was so widespread and so deep as well. And there were a lot of homes that were destroyed and many lives that were lost. So the wasteland consists of two distinct forms: creating new land from sea or river beds, or restoring an area to a more useful and productive form. So these are examples of wasteland reclamation. So afforestation, growing forests over cultivable wasteland. So uh, when you grow forests over cultivable wasteland, so pwede pa, you can still plant trees on this wasteland, and we refer to such activity or such process as afforestation. So reforestation is when you grow trees again over the lands where they once existed but were destroyed by fires, overgrazing, and excessive cutting. So this method would check waterlogging, floods, and erosion, and eventually increase the productivity of the land. So we're all aware of reforestation, di ba? So providing surface area, the easiest way to protect the land surface from erosion, which is just to leave the crop residues on the land after harvesting. Remember what we said about the soil conservation methods? These are meant to prevent erosion and also to retain the nutrients that are found in the soil. So that many of these methods of wasteland reclamation would actually involve the soil conservation methods that you have already seen in Unit 1, di ba? Yung mulching, strip farming, terracing, contour plowing. So these are measures, or these are methods of wasteland reclamation. Okay, and so with this, so leaching done in salt-affected land where the salinity is decreased by leaching the land with much water. So you prevent the effect of salt on land by leaching the land with much water, flooding the land with water, so that you dilute dilute the salt concentration, or dilute the salts. So changing agricultural practice such as mixed cropping, crop rotation, and cropping of plants, which are for the purpose of improving the soil fertility, and ecological successions, which refers to natural development or redevelopment of an ecosystem, which helps in reclaiming the minerally deficient soil of wasteland. So there would be changes of organisms, changes of plants. So this would actually be natural succession, and in the process there would be reclaiming or renewal of and replacement of the minerals that have been removed from the wasteland. Okay, so need for wasteland development. Wasteland development provides a source of income for the poor, so ensures constant supply of food, fodder, and timber for local use, because uh, you restore the productivity of the wasteland. So may pagkain na ulit, may mga plants, may mga trees from which you can get your food. So it makes the soil fertile by preventing soil erosion and conserving moisture. So the program helps maintain an ecological balance in the area. So the increasing forest cover also helps in maintaining local climatic conditions. And this is the last, which is of course a very serious problem that we are facing right now. So waste management. So even before the pandemic, we already have problems with waste management. Just like what I mentioned about the landfills, di ba? Na nakulangan na tayo ng landfills, and we are thinking of other ways of dealing with our waste, such as yung mga incinerators, which of course would be very dangerous because you are uh, actually producing, you're actually aggravating the air pollution in the area. So uh, no to the use of incinerators for waste management. So um, and now with the pandemic, we saw a tremendous increase in the wastes that are generated from uh, from hospitals, of course, and even from households, such as masks and PPEs, uh, PPEs that are being used by health workers that cannot be reused, diba? Once you have used this maybe a few times, then you have to you have to throw this away, or you have to dispose this, unless there is a way by which you can clean this up all over again. So this is the definition of waste. It's any material which cannot be used in the form in which it is produced. It's no longer needed by us because it has lost its original value. If it is not properly disposed of, it can cause soil, air, or water pollution. And its accumulation also poses serious threat to living organisms and the ecosystem. So these are examples of wastes. So industrial waste. So the wastes coming from domestic waste, of course, the sewage that we have mentioned earlier. So electronic waste. So saan natin itatapon yung mga appliances that are already broken. So yung mga computers na hindi na natin magamit, yung mga laptops, yung mga cellphones. So where do they end up? So of course, construction waste, agricultural waste, and of course, the most dangerous, the nuclear wastes. So these are based classification of wastes based on physical state. So solid waste, liquid waste, and gaseous waste. And then based on degradability, we have talked about biodegradable waste earlier, and also non-biodegradable waste. So these are the effects of waste. Of course, the greenhouse gases, which we have mentioned earlier in relation to climate change. So the culprit really for the climate change or the global warming that we are experiencing at the present time. So the rising global temperatures can result in increased levels and changes in precipitation. So changes in regional climates can alter forest, crop yields, and water supplies. And of course, such changes would affect human health and animals, and of course many types of ecosystems. And I think from the articles that you have sent, I have picked up uh, some some that some articles that deal with the effects of climate change on various ecosystems. So this is the last. So how do we manage our waste? So the best way is reduction. This is the best option. If we reduce at the source, there's a smaller chance of waste generation, and the pressure on our already stretched natural resources is reduced. And that is why there are many supermarkets that do not use plastic bags anymore. So you have to there are no plastic bags that are used to like hold the groceries that you have bought. So you have to make use of your own bags, so the eco bags, and you have to use your own containers, but they don't issue, or they don't use plastic bags anymore. So reuse is the next best option. So the eco bags and that's the reason why they're called eco bags, because they can be reused, as the product is reused in its current form without any energy expended to convert it into a new item. So we use our eco bags over and over again. We use it for other purposes aside from groceries. Maybe we use it for like when the things that we pack. We use eco bags for this. So recycling is the last option. Although it converts a waste into a resource, it uses energy to transform that resource into a new usable product. And we see this in like for example, yung mga Tetra packs that are converted into bags or other things. So this is recycling. So, but this is the last option. So you can only recycle so much, and also you can only reuse so much. In the end, you'll have to throw this away. So the best is reduction. So because when you reduce, then there's a smaller chance of waste generation. So I think this is all I have for this summary lecture. So I'll stop sharing now and check if you have any questions. So there are 16 of us. That's like two